My name is John Fornell. I'm one of about 7 or 8 people who created a group here in Fitchburg called Fitchburg Resist, trying to do what we can to stand up to some of the attacks coming down and trying to unite with as many different people as we can to make our voices heard and be effective. We see the elections coming up. It will be critical, and it's going to be very important to have people organized in case the worst thing can happen with the elections. Anyway, I'm happy to announce and to introduce Matt Rothschild here. Many people here know Matt from his tenure in being editor of the Progressive magazine, as well as executive director of Wisconsin Democracy Project. So Matt's going to talk about how we can defend our democracy.
Thanks, John. It's good to see old friends. It's good to see some new people here. It's great to be in Fitchburg. I drive by this church all the time, and I always think of Phil Hastinger when I do it, because he was an old friend of mine when he was at the Cap Times, and then he had that good second career here. I don't live in Fitchburg. I got good friends who live on MM. I'm a little further down south. We're in the town of Dunn now, but it's just a spit in a high wind away. And my wife and I moved there 12 years ago, just as I was leaving the Progressive. She said we needed another chapter in our lives. And I was the stick in the mud. We were 1 block from West High School in Madison. And I was reluctant to move, but I said if you can find a place with more privacy and more birds, I'd be happy to move. I'm a crazy bird watcher, which is a redundancy. We're all a little crazy. But I've got great birds where we are. We're on the Wabisa wetlands, and so every day is a beautiful day. And I'm grateful for being there. So I'm also grateful for being here tonight with you. I want to talk about the threats to our democracy and then what we can do about them, because it's important to realize where we're at, and that kind of defines where we need to go and how we need to resist. And so I do want to say that I'm more hopeful today than I was on January 6th, 2021. I'm more hopeful today than I was on January 20th, 2025. I'm more hopeful in part because Trump's numbers are down in the upper 30s right now. And I think because of the great resistance, especially that we saw in Minnesota this winter, that our democracy is close to being saved right now, that we dodged a bullet. I do think that was a watershed moment, kind of like the 1960s water hoses on the civil rights activists, that America looked at it and saw the horror of that and said, we really don't want to go there. So that gives me some hope for going forward. But let me talk about the risks to our democracy, because Donald Trump is the single biggest risk our democracy has ever faced. We saw that on January 6th, when we almost lost our democracy in night. And were it not for Mike Pence just doing his job, and I guess you shouldn't congratulate someone just for doing his job, but if it weren't for him, we may not be here today. And Mike Pence will go down in history as a hero. And it's not often that I praise Mike Pence in common politically, but that is, he did meet the moment. And there are other people who didn't meet the moment, like Mitch McConnell, who could have gotten rid of Donald Trump at that second impeachment. And I was listening to his speech that night, and it sounded to me like he was going to vote to impeach this guy, because he said Trump was morally responsible for what happened on January 6th, and yet he didn't vote to impeach. And had he voted to impeach and brought some more Republicans along with him, there was no way that Donald Trump would have been able to be president again. And historians will reflect badly on him for that moment of crisis that he swung and missed. Also, they will be puzzled. Historians and citizens of the United States will be puzzled about not just Mitch McConnell, but about the American citizenry. How was it possible? Decades later, people will be looking back. How was it possible that the American public re-elected this guy after he tried to overturn an election illegally? And so that is a puzzle that I'll leave it to the historians to unravel. Maybe we can talk about it later if you'd like. But Then what happened when he did get reelected? On the very first day, what did he do? He pardoned the coup makers, the traitors, even the traitors who beat up police officers with American flags as spears. That was a shocking thing. And so much of what Donald Trump has done since coming back to power has been so shocking, so outrageous, that there's kind of an outrage fatigue. And we need to resist that outrage fatigue, because this is not normal. What we are seeing is way beyond the realm of the normal. And we can't normalize it, or we can't just put our head in the sand. And so I'm going to just delineate a few of the other horrible things he's done just to get us all on the same page. After getting the pardons done, he went after immigrants. And of course, this shouldn't have been a surprise, because at the Republican convention, you'll remember, there were signs that said mass deportation now. Everyone had those signs. I saw them on TV. And so he started this war against undocumented immigrants. He had things I'd never seen before, like masked agents of ICE, masked agents in unmarked vans, grabbing people, kidnapping people, putting them in these vans and sending them off to where? To prisons far away from where they live, prisons in El Salvador. He's been deporting immigrants to countries in Africa where the immigrants had never even lived. This is stuff that is so far beyond the pale. And then he writes an executive order trying to overturn the 14th Amendment right to birthright citizenship, which the U.S. Supreme Court is going to rule on any day now, I think. But I've got to believe even that Supreme Court is going to throw that effort out the window. I sure hope so. But this war on immigrants, this war on undocumented immigrants, is something the likes of which I've never seen in my lifetime. Maybe it goes back, to the Japanese internment camps or something like that, but it's not a pretty precedent. And then what else has he done? Well, he's used the Department of Justice to go after his political enemies in a way that Richard Nixon would be envious of. He's gone after Comey, he's gone after Letitia James, and he's done a whole range of other things. He's had his Department of Justice disobey the orders of a federal judge. I mean, there's a federal judge who's trying to bring contempt orders against lawyers of the Department of Justice because they were disobeying his orders. I mean, this is a guy who just does not believe in our democracy. And then he's gone after civil society institutions. He's gone after the media. He went after 60 Minutes. He went after ABC News. He went after Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel. He's called reporters enemy of the people, which is reminiscent of Goebbels. He called a reporter just a couple of weeks ago treasonous for asking a perfectly legitimate question on policy. So this is a man who does not respect or honor our democracy. He's also gone after the universities as an extortionist. He extorted concessions from universities so that, he's not content to be President of the United States. Now he wants to be head of the curriculum department at Columbia University. It's just ridiculous. He's gone after the media, as I mentioned. He's gone after law firms. He extorted concessions from some of the biggest law firms in the country to back off in suing him and actually to do pro bono work for some of his right-wing causes. So this has been a capitulation by some of our institutions of civil society. It's been quite frightening. The institutions that haven't failed us yet are the judiciary. At least some judges have stood up to him, even judges that he appointed, or that George W. Bush, or H.W. Bush, or Ronald Reagan appointed. So the judiciary, up to the U.S. Supreme Court anyway, has pretty much held its ground, and that's a good thing. But most importantly, the citizenry of the United States has stood up to him, and that's what is saving us. It wasn't just the folks in Minneapolis. There have been people all over the country and people all over Wisconsin, people right here in Fitchburg who have been resisting, and that resistance has been crucial. The scholars of fascism, like Ruth Ben-Ghiat, the NYU professor who wrote the book Strongmen and has this great Substack called Lucid, L-U-C-I-D. She's on MSNBC, sometimes on CNN. She's great. And she has said, as Timothy Snyder has said, he's up at Toronto, but he wrote on on freedom and on tyranny. That protests, nonviolent protests by the citizenry is the single most important thing to resist an authoritarian. And so I applaud all the efforts by everyone in this room for doing what you're doing, and we need to keep doing that. There are, Trump shouldn't be underestimated. He is a narcissist, he's a pathological narcissist. He will be in the DSM-6 or 7, whenever that comes out, the Diagnostic Manual of Psychiatric Disorders. And if you look it up in the DSM-4, he checks every box. But he's not just a pathological narcissist, because he's kind of a fascist. And I've refused to use the F word for my whole 32 years when I was at the Progressive, and my 8.5 years when I was at the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign. But he does have the characteristics of a fascist. And what are those characteristics? Well, number one, he is hyper-nationalistic. That's what the MAGA hat is that he wears all the time, Make America Great Again. It's an appeal to people's sense of bereaved patriotism, that somehow someone or some group of people, whether it was the black president before him, sold the country out. And this appeal has been used by authoritarians and fascists throughout the 20th century. And he's a racist. Let's not mince words about it. I mean, the guy's been a racist since he didn't rent his apartments to black people in New York City, or when he, called for the execution of the Central Park Five, who were found not guilty ultimately, or when he came down the escalator the first time, calling Mexicans rapists and murderers. And all his talk about immigrants has this racist overtone. In fact, the only immigrants he wants to come to the United States are white South African Afrikaners, the descendants of the people who imposed apartheid on black South Africans. And you have Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense now, who doesn't want to promote any black military officer or any female military officer. And this is a racist, it's a hyper-masculine. Hyper-masculinity is also another feature of fascism. Anti-liberalism, hyper-anti-liberalism is a feature of fascism. And the media right now call this Iran war a war of choice, but at the Nuremberg trials they had a different name for it. They called it a war of aggression. And they said wars of aggression were the biggest war crime you could commit. And this is what Donald Trump has committed, a war of aggression against Iran, which didn't attack the United States. You can't go attack another country unless you've been attacked by that country, or the UN Security Council says you can go attack it because you're just about to be attacked yourself. So it was against international law, it was against the U.S. Constitution, which under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, of course, gives Congress the sole right to declare war. Now, Trump hasn't been the only president since World War II to engage in an illegal war. I don't want to gloss over the other presidents who committed these follies, but his has been the most flagrant. And our founders were real clear on this. James Madison said to give the president the sole power to declare war would be, in his words, too much temptation for a man. And clearly it's been too much temptation for Donald Trump. I mean, it's absurd to live in a so-called democracy when every other day you read the newspaper and the President of the United States is threatening to obliterate a civilization. And look what he said about the Iranian negotiators just the other day. He said, if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz again, there won't be a country left, and the negotiators themselves won't be able to get back to their effing country. That's what he said, like a mob boss. And that's the kind of personality that he has. So this is the threat that Donald Trump poses. There are other threats to our democracy, though I want to talk about briefly, just to put everything in context. This is not just about Donald Trump, that our democracy is in peril. Because, well, we have this right-wing Supreme Court, which has showed its own hostility to democracy and voting rights, especially. Just this week, it made it more difficult for persons with disabilities and disability rights groups to sue to enforce the ability of persons with disabilities to vote. And of course, they gutted the Voting Rights Act when it comes to racial gerrymandering. Right now, it's okay for any southern state, or any state for that matter, to gerrymander black people into the smallest little district possible, so that even if they're a majority in the state, if you can push them all into one district, they'll only have that one district representative. You can do that so long as you don't say out loud, publicly, or in writing that you want to deprive black people of the right to vote. Other than that, if you don't have that kind of evidence, you're good to go down there. And so it's just a ridiculous decimation of the Voting Rights Act. So we got this problem with the U.S. Supreme Court. We need to fix the U.S. Supreme Court. We need to expand the court if Democrats get the power to do so, because the current composition of that court and the likely composition in the next couple of years is just going to be a huge obstacle for our democracy. And then we have the problem of the fascist movement, because it's not just Trump. There is this very far right-wing, white nationalist, white Christian nationalist, ugly movement in this country. Because part of fascism is to have a mass base. That's the difference really between authoritarianism and fascism, or one difference. You can have authoritarians who, are head of the military, and they bring the tanks in front of the White House or whatever the presidential palace is, and they take over in a kind of Latin American style coup. You don't need a mass base for that. But fascism needs a mass base, and Trump has a mass base. I mean, look at all the votes he got. Not all the votes were because the folks, just love Trump to death. A fraction of them are, and a fraction of them, like that right-wing, hyper-nationalist, racist, hyper-masculinist, violent approach. And that's a scary phenomenon to have in this country. And we need to recognize that threat. Trump's not going to be here forever. I think it's going to be Ronald McDonald or Colonel Sanders who does him in, because his diet's over. At some point he's going to go. And just because he goes doesn't mean that some of the forces behind him and helped him get elected and who were empowered by January 6th and by the pardons of January 6th, those folks aren't going to go away, so we're going to have to reckon with that. There are other threats. We have a decline of the media, independent media in our country. My friend Robert McChesney, who died just more than a year ago, who was a professor here and then at the University of Illinois Champaign, Urbana, wrote many books, some along with John Nichols, about the crisis of journalism. Rich media, poor democracy was one of them. And if we don't have a real functioning media right now, in part because of the internet and how it's destroyed newspapers, but mostly because of corporate ownership. And we see what corporate ownership's doing to 60 Minutes right now, for instance. And there's a crisis of independent media that we need to solve. There's the problem of gerrymandering. I want to say quite bluntly, gerrymandering is wrong whether it is Republicans doing it in Texas or Democrats doing it in California. You shouldn't be allowed, we shouldn't cheer for gerrymandering, even if it's our side doing the gerrymandering, because gerrymandering takes people's votes away, takes people's voices away. If you cram a bunch of liberals in Wisconsin all into one district in the Isthmus of Madison and make ridiculous lines to grab other people, all the way up to, folks in Green Bay who are liberal and put them all in that same district, and, liberals will only have a tiny representation, and that's wrong, and it's wrong to do it to Republicans too. So I'm hoping that as a consequence of this nuclear arms race and gerrymandering that we're seeing this year, that enough people will realize that it's just no way for a democracy to function. Again, the U.S. Supreme Court capitulated on this or just punted. Chief Justice Roberts said in a case about 5 years ago that the U.S. Supreme Court is not going to weigh in on partisan gerrymandering. It's not for the judges, federal judges, to decide, which was a real abdication. And then there's the problem of money in politics, which Chief Justice Roberts also is responsible for because of the Citizens United decision that he wrote. Look, there's no reason that someone like Elon Musk should be able to spend $230 million or however many hundreds of millions of dollars he spent to try to get Donald Trump elected. And he's bragged, Musk has, that Trump wouldn't have been elected if it weren't for his money. And it's not just Elon Musk. I mean, here in Wisconsin, we've got Diane Hendricks and Richard and Elizabeth Eli, who spend inordinate amounts of money. They did it last time to smear Mandela Barnes in his race against Senator Johnson. And we need to do something about money in politics. It was an issue I worked very hard on, as well as the gerrymandering issue when I was over at the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign. So, what do we do about all of this? The first thing we need to do is keep protesting nonviolently. That is very crucial. I mean, protesting is crucial. Being nonviolent is crucial too. If the protests turn violent, it would just feed Trump. He's rubbing his hands together, hoping for some violence. Because if there are violent protests, he could invoke the Insurrection Act. And the Insurrection Act will be the legal fig leaf he would use to impose martial law. Because the Insurrection Act allows him to bring the military into our streets. And so we've got to, for practical purposes, be nonviolent, but more importantly, for moral purposes. Because it is immoral to protest violently. And we've got to stay on that moral high ground. We need to do other things too. I think it's really important to join organizations. And I know Fitchburg Resists is an organization that's doing good work here. Fitchburg Progress is doing good work. Fitchburg Defense Committee, helping out immigrants, is an important group. And then I think we should link up with larger groups, with Indivisible, with the No Kings folks. We can't solve this problem individually. And the fact that they're all here today is a great time because we're doing it in community. Because if you tried to do it individually, or you just sat at your computer and swore every morning, as I'm inclined to do some days, that's just going to make you crazy and burned out and feeling powerless. But when you join organizations, when you come to meetings like this, when you do it with friends, that's the best way. And you can sustain yourself that way. And it's really important for us to sustain this civic pro-democracy energy. We can't get burnt out, we can't get discouraged so much so that we don't want to do anything anymore. Because that's going to let the fascists win. And we can't let that happen. So join groups. There's great statewide groups here. There is the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin is doing a great job in defending our democracy. The League of Women Voters nationally put out an appeal about a year ago saying our democracy is in crisis right now. This is a crisis moment. We've got to do everything we can to nonviolently resist it and to register as many people and get as many people to the polls as possible. So that's the League of Women Voters. It's not a far-left group. It's a pretty vanilla group. But it does great work nationally and great work here in Wisconsin. Their executive director, Deborah Cronmiller, is a terrific leader. They've got a great staff. There are other great organizations, Common Cause of Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, and then Voces de la Frontera, the immigrant rights group, is a really important group to support. It's got chapters in Madison and in Milwaukee and elsewhere around the state. Voces, V-O-C-E-S, de la Frontera. Christine Newman-Ortiz is the leader there. Our undocumented neighbors are the people who are most at risk right now. And what they did up in Minneapolis to support those folks was really tremendous, and I think we should emulate it here. And we can do it neighborhood by neighborhood. The time to do that is now, really, before ICE is coming down Fish Hatchery Road. I mean, we need to have our networks established so that if our neighbors who are undocumented see that ICE is coming, they can come to your house. This is time to put people in your attic if you can, if ICE is coming, like they did in Minneapolis. And if Stephen Miller had his way, there'd be ICE in every town and city in America right now. So I think it's important to figure out how are you going to support your undocumented neighbors. And maybe the church can help with that. I know a lot of the places of worship are doing that already, and maybe they're doing it here already. But if not, get in touch with some of the immigrant rights groups and see what you can do, just neighbor to neighbor, because that's the best kind of organizing. And that's how people were saved in Minneapolis. So join those groups as well. I do think we need to also talk to, and this is a little bit harder maybe, talk to some people who may have voted for Trump, who you may know in your social circle, and try to bring them around slowly, not by calling them names or hectoring them or giving them, you know, this newspaper article or that one, but try to engage them on some values level where you agree with them on some things. This, of course, assumes that they're not, that they're, other than voting for Trump, that they are kind of a decent person. And there are those people. I know we want to just paint all the Trump voters as racist and fascist. It's just not true. It's not true that half of America is racist and fascist. It just isn't true. A chunk is, and you probably don't want to get in conversation with that chunk that has, you know, flying all those Trump signs on their pickup truck or who have Nazi insignias on their biceps. That's not a good use of your time. It may not be a safe use of your time. But there are those people, and I am in conversation with them. I play poker. I'm a Texas Hold'em player. So I play poker with all sorts of people. And they're nice guys. They're older white guys, which is the Trump base. But they're not horrible people. And so I am trying in conversation in person with them and on Facebook with them to gradually, you know, at least have them recognize that, you know, the direction of the country isn't going the right way. And maybe this thing that Trump did isn't the best thing. Maybe January 6th wasn't a good thing. I did that on January 7th with some of my Trump friends, and they agreed that it wasn't a great day for America. So we need to try to bring some of those folks around. And some of those people are coming around anyway, right now. And so this is a good moment to do that. We need to support independent media. That means supporting places like nationally, Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman, locally like WORT, for instance, or the Progressive Magazine or The Nation, or my former colleague at the Progressive, Ruth Conniff, edits an online paper called Wisconsin Examiner, which is a really good local paper. There's Up North News, which is another good Wisconsin news outlet. We need to support these independent media. I used to do work for Civic Media. I was on radio a lot last year and the year before I was let go of all the other local voices on January 1st, which was too bad and kind of a tragedy. But we need to support local independent media. And I also think it's important to engage in media activism. I did a little clinic, letters to the editor, writing clinic for Oregon area progressives. Carlene Beshan brought a group of people together at her nice house there in Oregon. And I'd given these clinics literally 100 times when I was at the Progressive. But it's easy to write a letter to the editor. It only needs to be 100 words. You know, get it to your local paper here in Fitchburg, or get it to the State Journal if and when something happens that you don't like. Use your anger to drive you to the machine, drive you to the computer. Everybody has anxiety about writing, even everyone except William Shakespeare and John Keats had anxiety about writing. And so the way you get over your anxiety about writing is to start when you're angry. Use anger as a fuel to drive you to the computer. And then you can write your first sentence, you know, Donald Trump's disgraceful war on Iran has got to end, or whatever it is. And then you've got to resist the temptation that is almost universal among people who have writing anxiety. And that is, you've got to resist the temptation to get up from your computer after you've written that first sentence and go get a cup of coffee or go do some laundry or do your bills. And, you know, this is what we all do. We want to get away from our anxiety-producing situation, and we want to give ourselves a little reward for getting the first step done. You don't want to do that. You want to sit at that computer after you've written the first sentence, resist that almost irresistible temptation, and write the whole thing through. And then you can, you know, check your email or go on Facebook or whatever it is. And also, don't kid yourself that when you stop after that first sentence and you go start Googling something because you need to find a fact or a quotation, you tell yourself. And yes, you do ultimately need to find that fact or quotation. But Google is just short for procrastination. And if you do that, it's going to take you about an hour and a half or 2 hours because you're going to spend you will have started at a place that you can safely tell yourself is related to the thing you're trying to write. But 3 steps later, you're in nowhere. And you're just wasting your time. So if you need to find a fact or a quotation or something, just put in brackets, fine fact or fine quote, but you want to write it all the way through and send it to your local paper. It's important for your neighbors to see, just like it's important to see you when you're going to protest on Fish Hatchery Road. It's important for your neighbors to see your name in the paper, writing a letter to the editor, and then they'll see you at the supermarket and they'll say, hey, they won't engage in a total political conversation. They'll just say, saw your letter in the paper, saw your name in the paper. And it's a start anyway. Just like when they see you at the protest on Fish Hatchery Road the next day, they can say, wow, I saw you out there. And then you can maybe start a conversation on why you were out there. And so I think that's important. We can write op-eds too if newspapers are take these editorials, but usually they'll take letters to the editor. And just do one topic. And while I said use anger to drive you to the computer, you got to take some of that anger out at the end. And the way to take the anger out at the end, first of all, you read it out loud. I don't know how many people saw Joy Harjo, the former poet laureate of the United States, when she was in Madison a month ago. I saw her in Milwaukee because I had to give a talk in Door County when she was here. But the day before she was in Milwaukee, so my wife and I went to Milwaukee. And we saw her, and she said the same thing. Read whatever you write out loud. Because it's a weird thing, because your ears will catch things that your eyes won't. Your brain is a weird thing. And your ears are kind of catcher's mitts. And I knew a guy who had ears that looked like catcher's mitts. But anyway, your ears are going to catch things that your eyes won't. And you'll stumble when you're reading, not because you don't know how to read when you stumble when you're reading it out loud, but because there's a problem in that sentence where you stumbled. So just put an X there and go back and try to fix it. Or you'll hear that you repeated the exact same phrase in the sentence before that you have in the subsequent sentence. So read it out loud. A letter to the editor is just 100 words. An op-ed is just like 350 words. It won't take you long to read it out loud. But it's important to engage in media activism. And I will give you an offer. I will gladly look at any letter to the editor or op-ed that you're writing. My email is easy to remember. MR for Matt Rothschild. Mr. Birdwatcher, digit 1. Mr. Birdwatcher 1 at gmail.com. I'm going to auction that off to the Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance, that email. Anyway, that's my email. MR Birdwatcher, digit 1 at gmail.com. I will gladly edit whatever you want to send to your local paper or the State Journal or Cap Times. Because it's really important to get that out there. So, of course, it's important to vote. I don't think I need to tell you how important it is to vote. It's important to vote this August and this November. It's possible for the Democrats to take over the state legislature and hold on to the governorship. It's going to be really important to vote in 2028, not only for the president, but also for the U.S. Supreme Court. So voting is really important. Getting your friends and family and pothead sons and grandsons and daughters to the polls. The League of Women Voters helps. There are other voting rights groups that help. There are another great organization, Wisconsin Black Leaders Organizing for Communities in Milwaukee, BLOC. Angela Lang is the executive director there, does a tremendous job. So if we do all these things, I am confident that we're going to prevail, that we are going to save our democracy here. It's not going to be easy. There are going to be other crises, moments like there was in January in Minneapolis. But I think the people are coming around. Trump's disapproval is 60% or more. It's hard to govern. It's hard to impose martial law or the Insurrection Act when you are doing that. We can't just be anti-Trump, though. It's important to affirm things. You know, the great poet W.H. Auden, after the Nazis invaded Poland, wrote a famous long poem called September 1939. And the last two lines in this poem were this. It was a plea. And the plea went, "May we, beleaguered by the same negation and despair, show an affirming flame." And so I think we need to make some affirmations. What is it that we affirm? Well, we affirm democracy. We affirm freedom. We affirm freedom of speech and freedom of assembly and freedom to be safe in our homes and our papers, freedom of privacy, freedom. We need other freedoms. FDR talked about the 4 freedoms: freedom from want, and freedom to be housed, and freedom not to go hungry. It's important to affirm other freedoms: freedom of community, freedom of solidarity, equality, and then freedom to enjoy and appreciate and respect nature. We can't live without, while we're destroying our nature. And then we need to affirm, I think, values that the great poet Wendell Berry talks about, like neighborliness, just being good neighbors, and love. I've been married to this great woman for 41 years. Well, I'm a believer in love. And so if we affirm these things that we want, and that our fellow citizens are going to want, most people are in favor of all those values, I think we can bring this country around and save our democracy. So thanks for listening to me. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. I'm concerned about the demographics that at least date myself from going back to the 70s when college students were active. And are you surprised that a great liberal institution like the university has been so complacent and so acquiescent in the face of all this? I'm extremely disappointed that with their position of privilege, they have not spoken up.
Well, that's a great question. I thought Chancellor Mnuchin was very acquiescent, very cowardly. She's now gone on to Columbia, but I don't know why the university didn't stand up more to Trump. I thought it was an abdication. And so there are 2 questions there, really. There's one, how the university and the university leadership responded, but I also thought you were going to get into how come we don't have more young people active in this fight. And I think they're there, and they will be there with us if the candidates are right. We saw this in New York City this week. We see it with AOC and Mandami. We see it with Francesca Hong. I see Hong signs on Lacey Road. I mean, if you start addressing people's concerns and you're not acting like a politician as usual, you can excite people. I think it's interesting that the 2 most popular politicians of the last 15 years have been Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. What do they have in common? One, they're not politicians as usual. People are sick of politics as usual, and they're sick of politicians as usual. And they want someone who's going to just speak to them, either from the heart or from the gut. And that's what Trump does. I mean, he gets up there and people on the left try to say, well, the guy's losing his mind. He's an old man. He's senile. If you listen to his speeches during the campaign anyway, I don't know about the last year, but during the campaign, he would give an entertaining speech. And he would talk in a way that politicians usually don't talk, sometimes profanely. He has that in common with Francesca Hong, I guess. But at least he didn't sound like a politician as usual, and that was appealing to people. Bernie, the same thing, and Bernie spoke from real authentic politics. I mean, he really believed and believes that democratic socialism is the way to go. And so does Mamdani, and so do the candidates who won in New York City, and so does Francesca Hong. Francesca Hong has a lot of young people supporting her right now, and a lot of grassroots support. And so, finally there's a candidate who actually is a renter. And she's appealing to a lot of young people who can barely make rent. And so I do think the politicians who want to appeal to young people need to talk in a way that attracts young people. Yeah, charisma helps. AOC, AOC is the same. She was a bartender, and she speaks clearly about what she stands for. Yes.
There's also a concern about, another concern about demographics. We look at this crowd here. I don't think there's anyone of color here. There aren't any young people here. I'm glad we're all here because this is important speech. And I'm wondering if one method, well, one possible approach might be that we take advantage of our elderliness. Because if somebody is dressed like me, going knocking on the door, they're not going to open the door. But if a young person goes knocking on the door, is this a religious zealot who's trying to convert somebody? If an elder goes, they're more likely to answer the door. I'm wondering if maybe what we can do as elders, we don't have as much energy, true, but what if we are the ones who go door to door, knocking on the doors, especially regarding ICE. We go to some of the migrant Hispanic communities, we knock on the doors, and we say, here are things that you can do to help keep all of us safe. That we might have more influence. Do you think we would have more influence, perhaps, than young people?
Maybe it's possible. Yeah, I would do that in concert if you're talking about immigrant rights. I would do that in concert with the Voces de la Frontera or the other groups that are doing that. I do think it's important to recognize that there are a lot of young people now in some of these nonprofit pro-democracy groups. I know Wisconsin Democracy Campaign and the League of Women Voters and Common Cause. They have a lot of younger people in their organization. Black Leaders Organizing for Communities is predominantly 40 and under in Milwaukee. And so there are people who are who don't look exactly like us, who are active right now, and we just don't see them, and that's okay. I know we want to see a more diverse gathering at the No Kings rallies sometimes, but you know, I was at some of those rallies at the Capitol, and I'd be looking around, and actually it was more diverse than a lot of the rallies I've been to over the last 10 years. So I think young people are they're certainly aware of the problem. They're certainly aware that the system isn't working for them. They're aware that capitalism isn't working for them. I mean, at the highest level of abstraction, you know what's going on in this country? Capitalism's devouring our democracy. It's devouring our democracy in a number of ways. Number one, it's allocating ridiculous amounts of money to the top 0.1% and 1%. And what do that 1%, 0.1% do? They buy the politicians, and they buy the laws, and they buy the policy to help them and not us. And so then the economy isn't working for us, it's working for them. And people understand that at a gut level, that we don't have as much power as Diane Hendricks has or Elon Musk has. And the system isn't working. And so when the economy isn't working for people, and when the political system is rigged, unfortunately, a bunch of people are susceptible to demagogues and fascists like Trump. I mean, that's one of the things that's been happening. And so when you have, I know people are scared of the word socialist. I've been in a fight, not a fight. I've been in a gentle, civil discussion with a right-wing poker friend of mine on Facebook over the last week about democratic socialism. You know, whether that isn't the answer to this problem. And so I'm just trying, and then we talked about, you know, he said socialism has failed everywhere it's been tried, and I said, well, look at the Scandinavian countries, you know, they have a version of democratic socialism, and they're the happiest people on earth, and poll after poll after poll. And then he comes back and he says, well, that's not a socialist country, that's a market economy. Anyway, we go back and forth, but they certainly have some democratic socialist attributes. And so anyway, I'm trying to engage in conversation with him, but there's a reason why young people are attracted to democratic socialism, why DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, is a growing power in our politics right now, is because capitalism is failing people. And every young person understands it. There's no really good jobs for people unless you're a tech person or an engineer or you're a doctor or a lawyer. I mean, it's hard to get a good job right now. Many of you all, or our parents, understand that. And rent is ridiculous in Madison. You know, people are paying my kid is paying like 45% of his salary on rent. And so anyway, these are the problems we have with capitalism devouring our economy and our democracy. And I just think it's important 30,000 feet to recognize what's going on. Yeah.
What was wrong with the Democrats, and how are you social democrats now?
Well,
Question.
what was wrong with the Democrats and are we social democrats? Well, well, I'm not going to speak for the collective we. I mean, I've been a democratic socialist, you know, and an atheist since I was about 19. But what was wrong with the Democrats? Well, Joe Biden was a real problem. It was political malpractice for his staff and for his family to encourage him to run again for another term. It was just a scandalous blunder. And it left Kamala Harris in an impossible situation. I thought she handled that situation with grace and aplomb. Sure, she could have said some things differently, but she was given an impossible hand to play. And so that was a real problem. Also, Biden, when he was president, unlike Donald Trump, had no connection with people. You didn't see Biden communicating with the American people. He wouldn't have press conferences. He wouldn't have speeches. He didn't communicate on social media the way Trump does, which is crazy. But Trump has he communicates. And Biden was bubble wrapped in there. And so people didn't connect with even the good policies that he was trying to enact. And he did enact good policies. I don't want to just dump on Joe Biden. He enacted some good policies, but he didn't communicate. And communication is a really big part of his job. And then he failed to, or his staff or his family failed to recognize that he was incapable of serving as president for 4 more years, much less as a candidate. And the skills to have as a candidate are different than those as a president. And he surely lacked those skills by the end, which became painfully obvious during that notorious debate. Yeah.
I watch hours of national news, but not too much local, so forgive the question. How active is ICE in Wisconsin?
Well,
And my second part of that question is you rattled off a list of organizations that are helpful. Is the ACLU in here with us?
absolutely. I'm a big fan of the ACLU of Wisconsin. I should have mentioned this. The ACLU of Wisconsin, the ACLU nationally, they do a great job. I don't know how active ICE is in Wisconsin. I see a news flash here or there on my news routes or in my email, but it's not here like it was in Minneapolis. And it had been in Milwaukee. They just made an arrest. I just saw Christine Newman-Ortiz at the ICE facility in Milwaukee on Facebook yesterday. They had arrested someone. So they are here, but they're not here in huge numbers at this point. Yes?
About a month ago, we had a speaker at the library, and I won't rattle off the details because I don't remember them, but he was a deportation lawyer, and he said that ICE is taking about 300 people a month in Wisconsin.
Wow.
Wow.
And deportation lawyers have a real hard job right now. I mean, what do you do if you're a deportation lawyer? This is an ethical dilemma. Do you tell them to go report, if they have a naturalization hearing or something? Because they go to the naturalization hearing, then they get kidnapped and sent off. I mean, it's a real dilemma for those folks. Yeah.
My concern is that as depraved and as unconscionable as the actions have been, my fear is that there's only one step more they can take before they can do things like impose military control or declare a crisis or, whatever. I'm afraid that they are still gearing up for the next step. They have a deportation, how many centers. We haven't, my fear is that we have just seen the start of this, particularly if they interfere with the election.
Well, the question is, have we just seen the start of it, and is it going to get uglier fast? It could. I mean, I was worried about this. I've been worried about this for a long time with Trump. And even before Trump came on the stage, when I was the Progressive, I was writing about the possibility of a president invoking the Insurrection Act and essentially declaring martial law. Because there's the Insurrection Act, there's the National Emergencies Act. A lot of people aren't familiar with that either. That gives the president, both of these things give the president unilateral power. The National Emergencies Act, it gives him unilateral power for 30 days. But you can do a lot in 30 days. And the Insurrection Act gives him, unilateral power to bring the military into our streets. The question is, if he didn't do it, if he hasn't done it yet, how is he going to do it with his popularity decreasing? And what would the nonviolent resistance look like, and would it be doable? I mean, it's possible. It's not it's not beyond the realm of the possible. And that's what's scary about the moment we're living in, because we have a guy who is megalomaniac, narcissistic, fascistic, and when he's cornered and losing, you never know quite what he's going to do. And he's got people like Stephen Miller whispering in his ear, and so, it's possible. I think it's less likely now because of Minneapolis, because of all the No Kings rallies, because of his plummeting numbers. But it's still within the realm of the possible. And then the question is, what do you do then? And then we're in a situation like you have to be very careful about speaking out in public. But he wants us to be careful about that. He wants us to self-censor or acquiesce in advance, as Timothy Snyder said. And we can't do that. So long as we have our freedoms, we've got to use our freedoms now to make sure they're not taken away. Yeah.
An addendum to that, the Constitution explicitly excludes the president from having any power over elections. However, because he has consistently passed executive orders that were unconstitutional, there's no reason to believe that he would not pass an unconstitutional order implying control of the elections, especially if he declares a state of insurrection.
Right. You're right. Article 1, I think it's Article 1, Section 4, gives local states the authority to run the elections. And here in Wisconsin, of course, we have 1,850 municipalities, towns, villages, cities running our elections. And they're not supposed to be run from Washington, D.C. So there's any kind of scenario we can think of that might make things a lot worse than they are right now. I just think it's less likely today than it was on January 20th, or even a few weeks after that when he started his war on undocumented people, because of the resistance, because of the nonviolent resistance has been so great. So I think that's the hopeful sign we have, and I think we just need to keep at it, redouble our efforts, keep organizing locally like you're doing right now in this room, and I wish you all the best, and let me know if you need help editing your letter to the editor.